a person.
Today, I am here to give you the assurance that I have not forgotten you.
If we want to see the new evangelization become more than just jargon, if we want to see it grow legs and gain traction and change the world, we have got to take seriously our responsibilities as husbands and fathers, and especially as sons of God.
I want to propose to you then that something that our world is desperately in need of in the midst of this crisis is Catholic Christian masculinity.
If you want to be a good father, then bring your children to confession with you.
But I can't get there unless I become a man of ascesis, a man of asceticism, a man of training.
A man not doing penance, a man not disciplined, is not a man.
You guys have upped your game.
You know what, guys? I gotta say, I love the concept of Man Show.
Warning: the Catholic Man Show is about to begin.
Welcome to the Catholic Man Show. We're on the Lord's team, the winning side. So raise your glass. Adam Minahan here, sitting in studio with my best friend David Niles. We got Juan on the buttons. I want to give Juan a big shout out. This is a special edition of the Catholic Man Show because we're recording early in the morning.
Mucho early.
Mucho early. And Juan still decided to get up and help us. So Juan, thank you for your offering your generous time to us.
El Juan, ¿cómo se dice early in español? Temprano. Mucho temprano. I feel like you have to say it kind of like with a deep voice. That's how you really, that's the key to Spanish.
Is the deep voice. Also Italian, probably.
No. I think Italian is
it's higher.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Why don't you introduce our guest?
Okay,
before we get sidetracked too much.
Yeah. So our special guest today is Doctor. I almost called you Father Doctor, but you are a father.
I'm a father.
Dr. Cuddeback, professor at Christendom College in Virginia. Mm-hmm. West Virginia or Virginia? Virginia. Mm-hmm. And I was very excited that you were the recipient of the Our Lady of Victory Award yesterday from the Alcuin Institute here in the Diocese of Tulsa in eastern Oklahoma. You're the second recipient of the award. I was very excited about you receiving it because that meant you were going to be here, and we get to have you on. So you're a professor of philosophy.
I am.
You're the
25 years of it.
Raiser of pigs.
I am. And children.
And children. Oh, sure. Sometimes people get them confused.
Well, it depends.
Right.
They both take a specific work.
Yeah, they do, indeed.
Fair.
So, thank you for being here. If you are not familiar with Dr. Cuddeback, check out his website, life-craft.org.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. .org.
Yep.
And also go back and through the archives, you can see the other episodes that we've done. Because we did two episodes before with Dr. Cuddeback, and both of them were just smashing, as they say in England. Mm-hmm. Smashing.
Wow, we are just
thank you.
Very cultured here.
International.
It's so early.
Yes.
I'm British in the morning. I don't know if you knew that.
Did not know that.
Yeah, that's why I speak Spanish so well.
The dots are connecting. Yeah. Also, you've given several talks for the Thomistic Institute, and you have a new book that is being reprinted for Ignatius Press coming out on friendship, which if you have not read your book on true friendship, I highly recommend it. Dave and I read it, and ultimately we just kind of
we ripped it off.
It off, and that's what we
good.
That's
what it's for.
Yeah.
When people say, "Hey, can you guys come and give a talk on friendship?" We're like, "Yeah, we know so much about friendship
because we're friends,
and we read your book." And so,
honestly, though, your book is very good. I just want to promote it even more than what Adam is capable of doing.
Wow.
Yeah. Because you take philosophy, what Aristotle's done, and you made it in a way that is not.
It's very digestible.
It's so easy to grasp, and so I appreciate that. And it's also not long. Like those are my favorite books.
Me too.
That's why I like Scott Hahn books.
I agree. Amen.
And Joseph Pieper.
I agree. Yep. Yep.
I figured out like that's another reason why I like Joseph Pieper so much, because I can read his essays. Right. Yeah.
So when's the reprint coming out?
Coming out very soon, in November. I think mid-November. Ignatius Press will have out a fresh with a little bit more than was in the other one.
Okay.
Still a short book, but with a couple extra chapters.
Nice.
I was glad to add. So thank
you. You have a chapter in there on your children dating.
I do.
Which is something that people, I think, need to hear more often.
We need to be thinking about that together and working on it. It takes a community effort.
Yeah, so go get the book. What's the title again?
True Friendship, Where Virtue Becomes Happiness. So until it's hard to get right now, until it's about to shoot out off the presses here in November.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
But my website will kind of be updating on that. So
awesome.
Mucho bueno.
Very good. So in light of all of the phenomenal public discourse that we've had recently in our society, we thought, we should just kind of dissect and figure out how they're doing it so well and why they're doing it so well, and then we can talk about how we can implement and imitate what they're doing.
Because I'm sure St. Augustine is just like in heaven going, man, the rhetoric is incredible. How it's an art form.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously we're being sarcastic
and facetious.
Yes. So we wanted to talk about that today because it does seem like
there's a huge breakdown.
Yeah, and discourse has, the art of rhetoric has really been long gone in our culture. I'm not sure that America has ever really had a culture of rhetoric. Not to say that there haven't been excellent rhetoricians,
rhetoricians
in America, but we've never had a culture of it, like some of the ancient cultures did. So I say that, but it's certainly we have very little. Like I don't even think the average person knows what does good rhetoric look like. What does it involve? And so we want to talk about it today.
Sure. I think we might be surprised if we went back 150 years. It's amazing how much of certain ancient things we actually did still have. When you go back to Lincoln Douglas and so forth.
Right.
But and then education was still very much rooted in knowing the Western tradition, which of course gave a foundation by seeing the good examples of those using public discourse unto a good end, by and large, right? In other words, there was a general conviction that together we can move towards something that's true. And now it really seems that discourse has been very much lessened. And there's not that conviction that together we can come to a truth, and it really is more of an exercise, it seems, of power at this point, kind of asserting what your view, your wants. And so there's a real philosophical foundation to that, I think, of there's a whole strand of philosophy that basically holds there's not truth that we can come to know, and so basically all assertions intellectually are just an assertion of your appetite, of what you want, and then so they're in competition. And so I mean this is a philosophical foundation for leading to kind of what we see, kind of shouting at one another and just saying, well, this is what's right, this is where I am. Not that it's always that crass, right? I mean it's complicated. I think few people would simply think that that's the so. I mean, it's so deeply written into us by our nature to find the truth that certain things are true, but nonetheless, I think you can say we certainly are more and more acting as though we each have our own truth.
Yeah, and I think that part of the reason for this is that moral relativism has become so rampant and so widely accepted in our culture that there is no truth, and so why would we pursue it in our discourse? Because kind of like what you're saying, it's just, you assert one thing and I assert something else, and that might be true for you, but something else is true for me. So if there is no truth, if truth is not something to really be pursued, then of course, the discussions and the arguments that you would make in order to highlight the truth, people aren't even going to be ready to hear them, just because they've never engaged their brain in that way. They engage their passions, kind of like what you're saying.
Right. Absolutely. But here's though another angle though. I mean, sometimes people can still grant that there is a truth, but their fundamental principles of their worldview are so different from one another that they really are not capable of having a conversation together. There's a great point in a dialogue of Plato. It's called Crito. And Socrates is talking to kind of his disciple Crito, and it's very dramatic. It has to do with the question in hand is whether Socrates should accept his condemnation, whether he should try to escape. And they're having a great moral reasoning together. And Crito basically points to, well, Socrates, other people out there are not going to understand what we're saying right here, / they're not going to agree with it. And Socrates rather dramatically says, look, Crito, you need to decide right now, kind of, to whom are you speaking? What is your audience? I understand there are people out there that hold very different views. Is your fundamental concern to be able to convince them, or is your fundamental concern to find the truth? And he basically alerts Crito to the fact that where there is a difference of very fundamental principles, you might not really be able to have much of a conversation at all. And so what are our first principles? Makes a huge difference.
Well, and you can also think that, relate that to friendship as well. If you don't have the same principles, foundations, then are you going to have a true friendship?
Yeah, very true.
So when we get back, we'll continue this conversation with Dr. John Cuddeback. More on the Lord's team.
The winning side.
So raise your glass.
I really love that dialogue, by the way. It's
Crito.
Juan, will you give me just a little bit more coffee, please?
Crito. Crito.
Oh, Crito.
There's nothing in there? Oh, I just filled it up. Oh, maybe I...
When I was pouring it, it
Almost
seemed
empty?
pretty empty.
Okay, no problem. Oh, there it is. Just a little heat me up.
Is that enough?
Yeah, that's plenty. Thank you.
There's a modern version of, in the sense of this, Alistair McIntyre.
Mm-hmm.
Who is that?
After Virtue.
I know that.
A book called After Virtue.
Okay.
So he's an emeritus professor at Notre Dame.
Okay.
And he starts this book After Virtue by having you picture a situation where kind of all connection with our roots has been lost. And so what possibility is there going to be as being able to have ongoing moral discussion? So it's very fitting for our whole topic, because he raises the issue of what is necessary in order to be able to have a reasonable public moral discourse. And his judgment is that given the way things are now, it's become practically impossible.
Right.
Whenever he was writing that book, is it true that I think I read somewhere that when he was writing that book, he actually wasn't like a Thomist. He was more of a Aristotelian, and then kind of at the end of the book, that book almost helped him become a Thomist.
That's very believable. I don't know well enough that kind of the timeline. I mean, he definitely was undergoing a philosophical and religious conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And exactly where After Virtue fit in, I haven't heard that. I mean, that again, such a thing would be believable, that he was starting to see certain things, and in working that out in his mind and writing it, that took him a little further. I wouldn't be surprised with that at all. But he's a very remarkable figure. After Virtue came out in the 80s. Pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still chugging along as an emeritus professor at Notre Dame.
I would love to get a chance.
An emeritus
to
professor still teaches?
Maybe not.
Okay.
In other words, an emeritus professor can kind of parachute in and maybe teach a course, to give lectures, but you can also be an emeritus professor and not be teaching.
Right. Okay.
So it's primarily an honorary.
So you're not
title.
retired but you're also not. You're just kind of working when you want.
Yeah. / you are retired.
It's kind of like
I think
the best stage in life. I work if I want to. I don't work if I don't want to. It's pretty great.
You know, I mean, professors. When you think about, professor. A professor shouldn't say this about professors. I'm talking about other ones.
Not me.
You know, they, after many years in the trenches, you like to see one be able to step back a little bit and be able to do, some of the other things that he would have wanted to be doing, but then still keep his fingers in teaching, because once a teacher, always a teacher. So I think the emeritus thing can be really great for men and who have given a lot.
The question is does that work actually become leisure at that point?
I would say so.
Because he's not making any money. I mean, he's not doing it for the money.
He probably gets paid if he.
Yeah, but he's not doing it for the money. He's doing it for its own end.
And he doesn't have to grade papers.
Oh.
What?
I mean that's normally, right? I mean,
unless he just wants to, like a throwback.
Yeah,
make him feel young again.
That just fried my circuits right there. I suppose such a thing's conceivable.
Only an idiot who's never graded papers would
ever
say
that.
Something
like that.
I'm still recovering, David.
I didn't think I could ever be offended like that.
No, that's beyond offense.
Yeah.
It's
please forgive me. I'm
more just pitying.
I am ignorant.
Okay.
Pray for me.
I will.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, here we go. Yes.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles, here with Adam Minahan, Dr. Cuddeback of Christendom College. Also, Juan Posada on the buttons. We're talking about discourse, public and private. The public discourse is obviously more obvious, easier to see.
Because it's public.
Right, exactly. Is that why?
Yeah, typically.
I hadn't quite figured out.
I'm here.
Sometimes you know a thing, but you're not sure why.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Adam.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so...
It's also called philosophy.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Well, let's talk about that later.
Okay.
I'm interested in
private.
I'm interested in that.
Sure.
We'll have some private discourse about philosophy. So,
Mm-hmm.
In high school, I did Lincoln Douglas debate. So, at the time, I didn't realize how glad I would be that I did it. I enjoyed it. But for those of you who don't know, Lincoln Douglas debate is a specific structure of a debate where there's a resolve, basically a topic. Resolved whether technology is healthy for humanity or something, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And when you do it, you have to write a case for and against. Mm-hmm. Because when you show up to debate, you don't know which side of the argument you're going to be taking, right? It's in these competitions. And so there is nothing that I'm aware of that will teach you to think critically about arguments more than that exercise. And so I think for the average person, let's just let's just have a debate with somebody. That you could do that, I suppose, like tell your buddy, hey, we're going to debate something. This is what it is.
We have that at the college.
You do?
Yeah, there's a debate society, and that it's. I agree that it's a great exercise. It's a great exercise of the mind, as long as we bear in mind what the end of it is, and
Mm-hmm.
that rhetoric ultimately is not. I mean, this was a big thing in the ancients. Some would use the science, the art of rhetoric, simply to move people to your position, versus using it to move people towards the truth. And so rhetoric is a very powerful and good thing in the hands of people that are using it unto a good end. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's taken for granted, by the way, in any real debate, is that there are basic principles in common. You cannot debate unless there are certain things that you agree on, from which then you can begin. And we started to talk earlier about Alistair McIntyre. This is one of the big things that he points out, that public discourse already is in such a state because there now is so little as regards basic truths that we can take for granted are held in common. And so where do we actually begin from if we want to be able to move towards coming to further conclusions? So it's a little bit of a scary thing, but I think a first principle in practical things is you have to take a realistic stock of where we are. If where we are is in our culture, in our society, in our communities, is that it's going to be very difficult to be able to have reasonable debate / reasonable discussion, communal deliberation. Not that we pull out altogether, but we can focus as a way ultimately of renewing the broader. We can go back to where we do have, again, it doesn't have to be in lock, stock agreement on everything, but you have to go to where there's at least a fundamental foundation, where we can have the kind of conversations where we can build something.
Right.
So you may have answered that question, my question, but just to clarify, the difference between that and quarreling, there's a difference between debate or public discourse and quarreling. Would quarreling be then that there's no initial foundation to launch?
I mean, that's probably a terminological thing. Let's say, I think you could reasonably say that this is more what we mean when we say quarreling. I think we could, sometimes when someone says I was quarreling with them, I mean, it still could have had a foundation. But nonetheless, I think that, quarrel has perhaps that kind of stronger sense of, gosh, yeah, what did they even have there together? So I don't think that's an unreasonable distinction to make.
I also think of quarreling as like arguing over something that doesn't matter.
And that's the way that the term is used too.
It's just kind of like, why are you even talking about this? This is a dumb thing to talk about. And you're getting all mad about it. You guys are dumb.
Well, and which point?
Why don't you debate about that? Who's dumber between the two of you?
Why don't you all debate about that? I'm going to keep talking. I mean, at this point, I think the whole situation publicly, I think, should lead us to a deeper examination of ourselves and our relationships, our households, our mini communities. Where do things stand there? How are we doing? I'm going to say in our intellectual life, in our pursuing being rational. And this is the gift of God to us. This is what sets us apart. This is where real human greatness is. It's always going to be in using our rationality, and there's a breadth to that, not just in like pursuing truth in higher speculative matters. I mean, using rationality well across the board. This is what human life is where it's especially happening. So let's look. How are we doing? I'm going to say in our intellectual life. Am I serious about what principles do I hold? What foundation do I have for these principles? What am I doing with that? How am I trying to grow in that? How then am I trying to do that with other people? We have to pursue the truth, pursue our rationality together in a community, in relationships. If we want to, I'm going to cut, I think there, if you don't mind, to a kind of punch. If we want to do something about the broader public discourse, I think we need to start at home and ask ourselves, are we being rigorous with ourselves? Are we cultivating a real interior life, a rational life, and a semi-public aspect of that, of with others in our closer to home communities?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, what are you going to do about the public? It's not like we don't have the power to change what's going on publicly, but we do have the power to change the way we raise our own children and the way we choose to engage ourselves,
which will make a big difference ultimately also.
Yes. I mean, that's the only way to change. The thing is, it's a long-term.
It's a long game.
It's the long game, right. Yeah, but okay, so that's what I would kind of like to talk about is, all right, the public discourse, it is the way it is. There are reasons for it, but mostly those are outside of our control, and so let's talk about what we can control. A lot of our listeners are a lot like Adam and I. They're raising children. So what can we be doing? Okay, so like, let's just take me as an example. We homeschool our kids. They're all very young. Rhetoric is, they're just not ready for it yet as an official subject to study. But when the time comes, what is something that we can do with our kids to help them be more well-formed in this way?
Well, how about this? I mean, very often, as you know, what we can do for our children begins in what we do with our spouse, what we do in the marital relationship, and what we do. Yesterday, someone asked a great question at the event that we were at of how do you prepare your children for friendship. And there's obviously a number of great things we could think about there, but the thing I particularly recommended was work on your own friendships, pattern it for them. And so I think this is where we men need to look and begin by examining ourselves and improve the level of discourse that we have. Dare I say, we could begin with there's a kind of interior discourse, then there's a discourse we have with our friends, and then there's kind of growing circles from there. Isn't it interesting that particularly as everything seems to be so polarized, you're afraid to ask people, where they stand politically. Even sometimes with people, the whole coronavirus thing and the response to it, you're kind of terrified to bring anything up, thinking, well, what are people,
right?
Where are they? I mean, we have to establish habits of being able to raise practical, concrete issues where there can be disagreement between good people, but that's okay. We don't have to allow the more general public polarization of this, that everything is just black and white, to make us retreat into our shell. We need to be able to, our relatives, our broader friends, those in our parish, that we civilly, right, with civility, with charity, with humility, be able to raise discussions about these things. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, haven't you all found this? Even with people that you share a lot in common with, you're afraid to bring up certain things.
Right.
We got to do something about that.
Yeah.
I think that it's because there's tribalism. Tribalism is such a big thing right now, right? So especially with the coronavirus, with the political debate. I mean, it's like this whole. It's an atmosphere to fester into tribalism where everybody has to go one way or the other. And, oh, good, you're on my side. Oh, no, you're against me.
Right.
And it takes a lot of fortitude to go against what you think they want to hear. Like maybe your thought is, I think I know where you stand on this, but I'm still going to go with what I believe. And so it takes a lot of fortitude, I think, to exemplify, or to say that, to come out and say that.
Yep, I completely agree. And then also kind of humility and willingness to keep engaging. And this is where I get habits of civility, habits of being able to interact with manners. I mean, it makes such a big difference. These habits that we've lost that we used to teach our children. And there's a little thing. I mean, the kind of, calling, addressing adults as Mr. and Mrs. and not interrupting. I think all of those simple things were part of recognizing there's a structure, there's a basis. I'm part of something bigger here when I enter into any discourse here. And so, I mean, just to be teaching your children manners, I don't believe that children are to be seen and not heard. No, let them speak, but in a context where we're treating the manners, right? And that they see you're entering into something big, something I'm trying to do with mommy all the time, something I'm doing with my friends.
Yeah.
Come, you can join us in this very noble project.
Absolutely.
Sweet. Well, we're talking about public discourse with Dr. John Cuddeback.
And private discourse.
Good job. We'll be right back. I do think that there's people who struggle with striving for the truth or publicly striving for the truth because of the lack of, or the knowing of having the backlash of knowing, like, oh, I'm not going to be in their tribe anymore. I'm not going to be they're not going to hear what they want to hear in this. And so there's going to be backlash for it.
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, the coronavirus thing is to me is a very stark example of that. People tend to have very strong feelings about the science and what the state of the science is, whether you should be wearing a mask, how the church is responding, what's going on in our parishes, and you start a conversation with someone, and often you realize if someone's coming from a different place, you just kind of look to run. I'm
Right.
going to try to get out of this conversation as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
Now, frankly,
Smash your
sometimes
hand. I gotta go.
yeah, I mean that might and maybe depending, maybe you're not going to get much further.
Right.
Right? I mean sometimes that it is going to be beyond our control. I mean, it takes two to tango. Just because I'm good at discourse doesn't mean that we're going to be able to have a good discussion.
Right.
But nonetheless, to be doing everything I can from my side, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a cost-benefit analysis that I think we all do. That like, what is this? If we
How much mental
if we go
energy is
down
this
this road,
gonna take?
how much is it going to cost me, and is it even going to matter? And
Should we circle back and think about that a little bit more again?
Sure.
Here, as you wish.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that might be worth doing.
Yeah.
And
Is this number 3?
Yes. So wait. So 2 more. 2 more. Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. Sitting here with Dr. John Cuddeback. Go check out his website, life-craft.org. Also used to be known as From Bacon to Acorns.
Bacon from acorns.
Bacon from
because
acorns.
the pigs eat the
acorns.
acorns.
Got it.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. It took me like several times to, and then I finally realized like, well, you're not getting acorns from the bacon. I mean, like, I know that there is an argument to be made that you are. You throw a dead pig at the base of a tree.
Good point.
Eventually
It's
you're
a
going to
great
get some
circle.
acorns, but that's not what his website was.
Right.
True.
So we're talking about public discourse. We're talking about the lack of being productive in public discourse. Maybe this is where we could pick up from is like, why is the reason why we struggle with public discourse? Is it because we're egotistical? We don't want to hear that we're wrong? Is it because that we're struggling with we let our passions and our appetites rule us, and so we can't even think about what the truth is, or even like consider it, because you don't want to be wrong? I mean, religion and politics instantly emotional highs, right? You get walls that are built up, and it doesn't matter if I logically bring you to this conclusion. There's no way around it. This is the answer. Those walls have been brought up, and I'm not in a disposition to hear the truth and understand it.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
Where are we? Like, why?
Well, discourse of any kind can only be quality if we have certain moral dispositions. Discourse is a very important part of rational human life, and as Aristotle saw so clearly, the right moral dispositions are the key, necessary background, prerequisite to be able to do anything truly human well. Think about this. To have a good conversation with your friend, this goes back to one of our favorite topics, right? The kind of character it requires of you to be able to have a good conversation. The willingness to listen, the willingness to hear that you're wrong, the willingness then to change. The various virtues you mentioned, courage, that's certainly one of them. Again, patience, humility, are all very much involved in this amazing project that, again, ultimately is about pursuing the truth. Or in any case, it should be about pursuing the truth, and it will be more able to be about pursuing the truth if we have that kind of moral disposition. So sure, to the extent that we're selfish, self-centered, unwilling to suffer, kind of overrun by desires for this or that for me, right? These are the kind of things, by the way, that have become enshrined in our society. We no longer, as a broader society, are working together for moral excellence, for discipline, for restraint of appetite, right? And so it's no surprise then if we're communally saying to people, you can want anything, and then we're surprised people aren't being civil to one another. Look at the state of our discourse. If we're telling people that you can want anything and do anything, and that you can't ever tell anyone else that there's anything right or wrong about human actions, then of course there's not going to be any decent discourse.
Right.
So yeah, in short, selfishness ruins everything. discourse being one of the great goods that it ruins.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about what are these core principles that you were, talking about that you have to have in common. At first I thought, oh, well, it would be, Christian values, but then I said, no, it's not even that, because there are atheists who are very capable of sitting down and having good discourse.
Yeah.
And so I think, and correct me, give your own thoughts. It seems to me like the basic, the most fundamental core principle is just a recognition of reality.
I like that. Absolutely. That there's a truth of reality that can be grasped, that should be grasped, that in many ways is the human glory and gift to come to know, which then brings us to kind of a more specific point that goes right with what you're saying is human nature.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some shared notion of what it means to be human.
Right.
And to me, that's what a good philosophy, right? I mean, ultimately, it is about a shared understanding of what it means to be human that was very much implied, for instance, in the likes of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, of pursuing a wisdom. It was taken for granted that that's a profoundly human thing to do. Kind of part and parcel of that wisdom is fundamental things about what it means to be rational. And then to be rational in a reasonable way includes these various virtues. And that's why, so not that long ago, even if it wasn't rooted in a shared Christian vision, which it often was, but even if it's not a shared Christian vision, at least it was a shared kind of human vision, natural vision of what it means to be human that again predates Christianity.
Right. That we're not the arbiters of truth.
Exactly.
That truth exists apart from us.
Exactly, and it is ours to discover it
and move towards it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not just say what it proclaim what it is. I will say what is so or not. So no, already there's a kind of humility in standing before reality. There's something great to discover here, and in discovering this, to conform ourselves to it. That's a very Joseph Pieper point. To being human, it's conforming yourself to what is there, and of course, we'll always find that this is better. So those kind of things, that's the basis for, hey, then there's a lot we need to do together. So we need to deliberate together. We need to have discourse both at a private level and then branching out from there at a public level. And as you mentioned, Dave, earlier, that we might not be able to directly change. We can't immediately and directly change things that are the result of a big breakdown. Right. More broadly in the community. And we're going to have to suffer that. And we're going to have to suffer that with a certain integrity ourselves. We never give up on the broader community. And one of the main ways I think we don't give up is by continuing to work on it in ourselves, in our relationships, in our closer communities.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of this gets mixed in with politics, because politics has games that are played in and of themselves, which have a way of tainting the rhetoric. You just look at the debates. They're not about truth. They're about scoring points.
Right.
It's all about this point.
Who won?
Arbitrary point system about, what can we use against you in the future? So a part of that is, what do we do? Well, once again, be local. We're, local. Think locally in our discourse and in your politics, and make sure that we're elevating people to politics who are capable of good discourse, because the people we elevate here now go on to become, bigger and better things for the rest of the country.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? I'd like that
Sure.
point about scoring points, because reality check, self check. Don't you and I do that?
No. I don't.
Well, you and Adam, I was actually thinking.
Well, Adam does it a lot, and I'm always trying to tell him, look,
we'll work on that.
Yeah.
But I mean, think about our. The last time you had an argument with your wife, I mean, don't we so easily and naturally move into kind of, well, I'm right here, right? and it becomes more important to us even how we're appearing in this discussion, or we need to feel okay about ourselves and, oh my gosh, I haven't been wrong on this, have I? So again, we go back to the moral dispositions, the humility that's needed. Show me the man who, in the middle of a discussion, an important, maybe intimate discussion has that flash of, oh my gosh, I'm wrong. And rather than saying, ooh, now I'm being terrified about it, so how can I kind of make that go away? How can I pretend that didn't happen? We'll rather immediately have a disposition of, oh, so I have to change.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that means that some of these other things I've been saying, some of these other things I've been doing, need to be revised. That's a powerful thing.
Right.
That's what it requires. If ultimately we need to have that kind of man be the man that our society honors and is cultivating and is trying to raise up.
Right. Because it should instill gratitude in that man. You know, when you realize, oh, I'm wrong.
Exactly.
That should be our natural reaction. Thank you for pointing this out to me. Like,
but instead you have this thought of, I want to double down. Instead of like, oh, thank you for revealing the truth. It's, no, I am now right because of this, you know, and you double down on your position.
Or you stake down, like you might have a sliver of still, okay, but I'm still right about this, you know,
Exactly. Don't we do that?
You shift to something.
We slide over a little bit because we're trying to save face. And, you know, we can be merciful on ourselves. I think that's actually an important sign of how we naturally have a sense of how important it is to be right. Right? Truth matters. We need to be moving towards getting the truth. And there's something a little bit threatening to us when it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have it. So that's understandable. We need to encourage one another and know it's okay. God designed it so that you come to it slowly and over time, and lo and behold, through the instrumentality of others that will help us see, and that's painful. Where's the man who's willing to say thank you? You've been the instrument of my growing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't it's hard to imagine that happening. It's, you know, almost silly to think about like that actually happening, but really that should be what we're doing, you know. But when you just try to picture it in your day-to-day life,
right?
If you saw someone do that, it would just, if I saw someone do it, I would be blown away.
Right.
Like, wow, I cannot believe that just happened. You know, sort of like if you've ever seen somebody on Facebook ever say, you know what, I think you're right. It's like, whoa, take a screenshot of that. We need to like frame this little dumb Facebook conversation, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Speaking of Facebook conversations, just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll be right back. We're talking about Discourse here on the Catholic Man Show with Adam Minahan and David Niles. We're on the Lord's team.
The winning side.
So raise your glass.
Speaking of Facebook conversations.
Where was that going?
It's just like Facebook conversations are the epitome of the opposite of dialogue, of discourse. You know, it's just
that's a good point. Talking about another way that
just a dumpster fire,
which has repercussions. In other words, clearly that carries over to what people do in the other parts of their life.
Right.
If now this has become kind of common. I remember the very first piece I ever published online, I've shared with you, is the one on splitting wood by hand. And there was someone who just got really aggressive in the comments. And I remember I was really shocked. I'd never really seen such a thing before. I mean, honestly, because I hadn't published online before myself.
Yeah.
At that point, I had not read much of anything online. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is whatever it was. I don't know, it was 10 years ago. And I remember just feeling, wow, this is just really weird. And I would write a comment and kind of respond to him. And he would come back aggressively, and I just kept like, what's the point? Why is this? Well, gosh, I mean, that was nothing. So that is one thing I try to do I try to keep the comment discourse on when someone brings in a comment, even disagreeing. I'll maybe try to just say, okay, well, thanks for the thought. and if there's something I can agree with, I try to agree with it. I just because I figure, hey, I mean,
right?
Why not? I mean, what's the point here anyway?
Yeah.
Anything you guys want to get in the last section?
Yeah, I'm going to start with it.
I figure we would start at the beginning, which is typically a good place to start.
Very good place to start.
Yeah.
I like to start at the end.
Oh, Quentin Tarantino it, huh?
Well, at least with the end in mind.
Oh. Okay.
Aristotle.
Telos.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles here with Adam Minahan and Dr. John Cuddeback.
Hey Dave, there's something that we need to do really fast.
Tell me.
And let's give a shout out to Catholic Woodworker.
Ooh, Catholic Woodworker.
We did not do that in the second segment, which we normally do.
Yes.
Go to thecatholicwoodworker.com. You can pick up heirloom quality rosaries, home altars, crucifixes. Use the promo code TCMS, The Catholic Man Show. You get 10% off all of your purchases. thecatholicwoodworker.com. Boom.
Nice. I'm glad you remembered that. You remembered that. Okay, so as we've been talking about discourse, the whole time I've had this like tugging feeling in the back of my mind that ultimately this comes down to like the reason why someone would be incapable of a healthy discourse is because they don't have a healthy prayer life. There's something in me that says if a man has established habits of prayer, that his habits of discussion will reflect that. That if he is having discourse with the Lord, that all of his other discourse will be affected. I don't know like what else there is to say about that other than, and you know, that's just the way I feel.
Reverent silence for a very important point.
Yeah, I mean, because oh, gotta miss the table there with my elbow. You know, there's just, I don't even know why. I can't come up with like the logical connection necessarily. I just feel like this is really the source of why have we lost discourse? Well, I think it's because we've lost the virtue of prayer and religion largely in this country.
I think it's an outstanding point. Here's something that at least we can let's not just leave it in reverent silence. It's worth trying to unpack it. Aristotle holds that he says our disposition towards our friends is rooted in our disposition towards ourself. And so when St. Thomas Aquinas unpacks that, he talks about how we need to have virtuous dispositions towards ourself, even and he says an interior conversation and an interior kind of affirmation, an appropriate love of ourself is a basis, is a pattern for then an appropriate affirmation towards others, seeing them for who they are, speaking with them. And so I think in a similar way, the kind of interior conversation we have is a basis for conversation with others. And I mean, just further, what better foundation is there for our learning basic dispositions towards others from whom we're going to learn? Then in your interior life, speaking with our Lord, we have to learn humility. We have to learn to listen and to realize where we're wrong.
Yes.
Right? And if we can do that there, then that, of course, is great practice for being able to do that with other people. There's someone certainly we're gonna learn from, listen to.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is, that in prayer you learn to surrender to the Lord. And so then when you hear the truth, you can more easily surrender to it because you recognize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and perhaps we actually even answered this question earlier in the episode, because one of the things you said, Dave, was like you can't have a public discourse unless you have a touch with reality. You can't with the touch with the real. And how real is it to have the conversation with the divine?
Right.
You know, you can't get any more real than the divine. So that would naturally bleed into the supernatural. Always bleeds into the natural.
Right. Yeah, it's possible that prayer is the most human human behavior that you could have, right? I mean, even friendship is really designed to, prepare us for friendship with Christ.
Amen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely great point to make.
So the other question I have is about technology. And I just wonder how much the influence and the domination of technology as the new medium by which we communicate, I think the average person communicates through a medium of technology more than they communicate face-to-face these days.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what implications that could have. How responsible is that for the degrade in discourse?
Very.
Yeah.
Next question.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, yeah, boy, that's worth unpacking in all sorts of ways. Isn't it interesting? Civility in discourse, appropriate manners. One thing that jumps to mind is how in our emailing, not to mention texting, we drop so many of the great traditional forms of how we communicate with one another and how we speak, and we drop it all out in the name of efficiency, and it changes our attitude. I mean, think about how forms of address, proper forms of things where you say things like even, don't you think, or perhaps this is so. Or, the kind of things that is very easy to do when we're speaking. That I think that it is showing that we're listening, that we realize we might not be right, that we're interested to hear, how you might respond here, and even in bodily gestures, appropriate words. That's what you can do in person. We drop all that out. So now we don't have those things that are encouraging those dispositions of humility, listening, willing to be corrected. Right, it's all been dropped out. So how about here to me is something it's worth doing. Emailing, still, what for me is it takes a resolve, and I keep doing it. I keep saying dear so and so, rather than just starting to write. I mean, so many now that just there's no introduction, and also I sign it. I mean, I still say something like sincerely. Wish you the best. I'm going to make an unduly big deal of it, but to me, that's a way of constantly signaling I am communicating with another human person. And the dispositions here, the treating them as a person is key. It's so easy. In the comments, we were talking in our break about the Facebook conversations and the comments on blogs, and just how it just gets worse and worse and worse. Part of that is the anonymity, right? We're not in the body presence. We're not seeing facial expressions, and so we don't think that we're really engaged in a human thing. But it is a human thing. We've got to keep it human.
Right. Yeah. You're not talking to a person. It's just another account. It's just a different Facebook account that you're talking to.
Yeah, because it is a utilitarian purpose, right? You email, things like that, is you have the idea of like, I'm just trying to do this just to communicate this message, and it dehumanizes the conversation.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, I'm just trying to get this out. I mean, in work, I think about that all the time. It's like, I'm just trying to get the message across as quickly as possible so that way we can move forward. But you don't stop and think, well, I'm doing this to another human being and not, it's not just some avatar like you were saying.
Yep.
Yeah. And I worry especially for young people. I mean, you kind of brought this up in your talk last night. The millennial generation is like the last generation to have grown up without technology omnipresent. And the kids now, just technology is the way of life. And I just really am concerned what it's going to be like.
What it's going to yield?
Right. I mean, it's simple things like learning to look someone in the eyes when you talk to them, which they just don't have it's just not the habit that's just not the way they communicate. Right. Obviously they do sometimes, but it's not the same. I mean, it's just not the same. Everything about it is different. Right. So what are the consequences going to be? And I don't know that anybody really knows.
Indeed. But certainly what talking to parents, I mean, and this is a whole other topic. We can talk about what you then try to do to form your children, to help them as regards that. But one thing for sure that we know is always immediately in our power, again, is to pattern what's right. So let's not underestimate that we not get sucked in. I think so often when we talk about these things and we kind of bemoan, okay, those poor teenagers and their technology, but then we just kind of keep plugging right along, kind of doing the same things ourselves.
Right.
And so, again, it's going to be subtle. I'm not saying you have to get rid of the technology, but how do we not be mastered by it? How do we master it? And I think one simple thing is raise the level of discourse. Put into it, this takes effort, but put into it kind of the human feelings. Put in the kind of words that are conveying, I recognize that we're in a noble project together. I'm just one participant in it. I'm not just the one that's asserting something here. I'm working with you on this. That can be conveyed in how we write. That can be conveyed, obviously, in how we speak.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be cultivating that disposition in us. Are we thinking that? So often I think we think, well, we've got the truth here and we need to just get that out. We see some aspects of the truth, and there's key aspects of the truth that you and I don't see yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to act like that. People will feel it in our discourse, public or private, if we have the conviction that we've got a lot to learn and we're going to listen while we move forward with the confidence that we can get to the truth. It's a great balance.
Mm-hmm. Are there any good rhetoricians out there that you admire these days?
I'm sure there are some contemporary, and nothing is immediately jumping to mind.
Yeah.
And honestly, I more go back to kind of reading, someone like a G.K. Chesterton.
Sure.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Who was great at rhetoric. John Henry Cardinal Newman.
Mm-hmm.
These men are trained and schooled in a beautiful art.
Yeah.
Rooted in the conviction that being rational is an incredible gift, and we need to keep working at it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for your
Great to be
time.
with you,
It's
gentlemen.
always a fun.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I can go to life-craft.org. We'll put it in our show notes so that way you'll be able to get to it. He has a whole man of the household course that you guys can go check out.
Yep.
Highly recommended.
Yes.
We're on the Lord's team.
The winning side.
So raise your glass.
And cheers to Jesus.
Amen.
I want to give a shout out to the 9 people who decided to watch this episode instead of go to work today. You guys are awesome.
Your families may not be happy with you, but
it was worth it, though, right?
Pursuing something good.
Yeah, let us sit down and reason together.
Now, they're going to do each thing in its proper time.
Right.
They're going to work a little bit later.
Yeah.
or just
because
not have
they
a lunch
wanted
break.
Sure.
They wanted to think about some great things as we try to think about them together.
Yeah. This topic, as we were getting into it, I realized this involves absolutely everything, all of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's so many things I wanted.
All of society is just
I was trying my best to.
You can't say, there's these are the problems. It's no, everything is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I liked,
or everything's the answer.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's which is kind of a problem in itself, that you can't just do a few things. You have to do everything.
Right.
I liked I think it was Aristotle quote you said last night that society produces the kind of men that it honors.
Yeah.
Was that him?
It is. That's it. Straight on. Yep.
Yeah,
it's
that
huge.
is just boom.
I mean, it really makes you worry when you think about prima donna sports figures.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Business tycoons.
Actors.
Yeah, or
Hollywood actors.
These are the people that implicitly, if not explicitly, we honor. It's a very scary thing. And then the men, like that man on the wall, completely. There's always a certain hiddenness, but we don't even implicitly honor such a thing. We ultimately ridicule such a thing as a community.
Yeah.
And there are implications to that. I mean, we men, we take that in, and we feel it because you naturally know that what's good should be honored.
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's amazing the subconscious effect it has on us. I'd love to think more about this is the aspect of how that affects us men for success in the business realm. The extent to which we feel that we need to perform there because that is what kind of constitutes a man.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it isn't important to perform there well.
No, yeah, sure.
Right, but the way that society thinks about that is not in accord with reality.
Uh-huh. Right, because we should strive to do all things well, in proportion to their hierarchy.
Exactly.
And it takes virtue to know what that hierarchy is.
It does indeed.
Anything else, Adam?
Adam's very pensive.
Closing remarks?
No, I was just listening, trying to absorb.
What was your favorite thing that I said? I want to know how I inspired you today.
Oh, boy, we have to choosing between all of them.
There were so many words. You had the best words of all the words. You had the best words.
Oh, that is one of my favorite.
We took a poll, and everybody said you had the greatest words. So,
Look.
Juan, are we still? Oh, we're still streaming.
Yeah, we're on Facebook.
I apologize for that. What are your thoughts on John Sr.? On his ideas of technology? Have you guys already talked about that?
No.
Oh, he gave you a look like.
Go, but you guys can keep talking.
Okay. What time is it?
8:40.
Okay, I have to leave soon too, but I do want to
Yeah.
want to ask you about. Thank you, Juan, for all your help,
Juan,
brother.
you're the man. God bless you. Great to be with you.
Amen. Thank you.
Restoration of Christian culture. What's the first one called? The destruction.
No, the
something of Christian culture that is
destruction.
synonymous with destruction.
It's basically whatever it is. It's the same thing.
And then the other one, the restoration. He has that very memorable image of open your window, throw your television out, and then close the window.
Mm-hmm.
It's a powerful image that I think conveys an important truth, but has to be qualified, right? I mean, because at this point, by analogy, it's like that's what he would have wanted you to do if there's any way that you could. And maybe you could at that time, frankly, because television was just really more just kind of entertainment, and you didn't have to get anything in particular from that. We have a much more dangerous situation now of your computer, which in so many ways is now the grandson of the television. You want to open your window and throw it out in so many ways, but now it's also where we're doing half of our shopping, and
right.
So you can't. And perhaps as things progress, we need to be doing some of our shopping there, right? So then, and it's so often the same with these, right? In many ways, John Sr. certainly would have just said,
hated
let me just demonstrate what John Sr. would have
said. Please don't. This is very expensive.
said to do with that. Yeah, I don't think he would have cared.
No, he would not have.
For the record.
Oh, I agree.
So now we have the incredibly challenging situation of we have to stay engaged with these things and figure out how to use them in a reasonable way, which is harder than throwing them out the window.
Well, and that's what I think Neil Postman made in a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death.
Yeah.
He made that. He said we.
Amusing or musing?
Amusing ourselves to death. That we can. It's almost like it's very hard to use this without just in their mind, And does it actually end up amusing us at all?
Right.
Does the TV actually amuse us? And it gets to the point where actually it doesn't. It doesn't amuse us at all.
No.
It numbs us to reality. It
right,
numbs us to not even realizing what's going on around us.
Which then raises the issue of, does this really keep us in communication with people?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I agree.
And obviously in some sense it does, particularly when it has now replaced the other things and made them go away. That is the real danger here, because when people say, well, now we're able to keep in touch with people by this, well, by the consistent using of these technologies, the other ways that we would have / could have been in touch have simply been exploded.
More authentic ways.
And so now, if you want to, you want to be in touch, well, you darn well better be able to get a text. Because otherwise you ain't going to hear from someone.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you're left in the terrible dilemma of, okay, do I want to have any contact with these people? Or if I do, then I have to start getting texts. But then how do you get texts without entering into all that goes along with it? Okay, now I'm in it. How do I control this? How do I not have my life be where I'm completely and consistently on call? I mean, these remain dramatic issues that we have to keep trying to figure out.
And,
yes.
And the business world is doing the exact opposite. It's trying to figure out, how do I keep this thing going? You're trying to figure out, how do I use this appropriate? And the business world is saying, like, no, I'll buy this for you and I'll pay for it for you. But now this is
that way we can get you anytime.
I'll buy the ball and chain, and all you have to do is just put it on there.
No, and even more than that, as I now start to discover, I wonder soon whether I will be able to travel if I don't have one of those, because I had this slightly terrifying moment when flying out here yesterday. Mm-hmm. It turned out that due to the whole COVID thing I hadn't realized, and the airline industry distress, the flight I was on was canceled. And so then so they just say, okay, well just go to the United app and you can take care of that. It's like, sorry, the United what? And so shortly, I mean, it's again, it happens incrementally.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But if I'm going to be able to get into the hotel, I mean, will you be surprised when you show up at a hotel and it'll be like, okay, just like flash your code and the door will let you in, or something like that.
Right.
Well, we sent you the code, right? I mean, and the barcode or something, right? So it's a tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I'm not gonna just sit here and yell about it, but there might be certain things then where fine, I might have to get it then, right? And then okay, I mean, you all are already in that boat, and so I might just have to get in that boat with you. And so I'm not saying, oh, that's the end of the world, but it is an example of how things will just keep going. And what's next?
Right, because it's such a slippery slope. Like in the beginning, you think, oh well, I'm not going to let this replace my interpersonal communication. And there's like a moment where I need to ask someone this question, and they're not here, so I'll just send them a text message because, otherwise this isn't replacing communication. This is more communication, right? As if that would better, but
right.
You could say that, and then you just get so accustomed to this convenience of, because that's one thing that I wonder. And I was actually talking about this with Lady Pamela last night on the way home from the event about how the expectations of people have changed. It used to be that people did not have the expectation of just being able to get a hold of you whenever they wanted. They'd call the home phone, and whoever answered would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, they're not here right now. Can I take a message?" And I know that there's a certain generation of people listening right now who
don't even know
have no idea what that and just feel like
disconnected from this idea.
Like a tablet of paper by the phone, that you would write stuff down on.
You didn't even know who was calling you.
Right.
Remember that? Like I had to pick up the phone not knowing who was on the other line.
And you always answered.
Yeah.
This is the Niles residence.
Right.
And people were just accustomed to that. Or you might have to go over to someone's house to see if they were home, and when they weren't, you just went home, and that took 30 minutes. Yeah. So today people just have this expectation of being able to reach you all the time immediately. And so, part of it is that just society's expectations of us have changed. And if I don't have the ability to send text messages, it's almost like it's offensive to people.
Yeah.
That they can't
Well, because then what ends up happening is now you're putting burden on them. Now it's like, well, I can't do anything until I get a hold of you and talk to you. Sure. And so now I have to wait for you to get back a hold of me, and now I have to be I have to be ready to take on your answers to get to make this happen.
And they think, what's so special about you?
Yeah,
that I have to do all this extra work to talk to you that I don't have to do to anybody else. Like, are you like some Mr. Special Fancy Pants over here? And like that's when I say yes. I am more than happy for you just to never speak to me. Actually, that would be great.
You do wear fancy pants sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, sometimes. Not gonna lie. So, but I mean, it just makes me like I had this discussion last night about the way I feel about email. It just makes me so mad. Like, and the same thing about phone calls or messages. Like, just because you have the ability to contact me does not mean that you have the right to contact me. Like, okay, you send me an email and like spam emails. I started getting emails this week or last week from like footjoy.com, and you go to unsubscribe and it's like, oh, you no longer want to receive our it's like, I'll sue you. I will. Don't even pretend like I signed up for this crap, and to me it's almost tantamount to slavery. Okay. Like, you don't have the right to my labor. Okay. And now you've forced me into this situation where I must labor even for a second over stopping your stupid emails because I am trying to be a responsible adult who has an email address so that other responsible adults who actually have some reason to contact me can do so, okay? Right. I'm just trying to be a member of society, a responsible member of healthy society.
They don't even hear back from you.
Well, they don't. I mean, and so I'm a bad communicator. I'm a very bad communicator, and this makes it so much worse for me because I get all these emails from, like, I feel like I should be able to sue like, I think it should be illegal to send me an unsolicited email. Okay, like, let's make a law. We have to distinguish between business email accounts and personal email accounts. But like, you cannot send me an email.
Ask how you doing, like, dear Dave, how you doing, man? I shouldn't do that.
But you cannot solicit me for business.
I mean, hypothetically, Dr. Cuddeback couldn't be like, "Hey, Dave, I'll be in town. What if we like recorded an episode of the Catholic Man Show? Why don't you give me a topic and maybe we could do that?
That's solicitation, though.
Hypothetically,
think about it.
No, well, also I have a business email address you could send that to. So, our radio station account email would be.
I send him emails all the time that don't get.
But it just makes me so like, I shouldn't have to put up with this. It's like
and you shouldn't, but you might have to.
There's something inside of me that just demands that justice be served. Like, somebody should be in jail for sending me these emails, and that's extreme.
It is extreme.
A little
bit, yeah. Well, we better
wrap it up.
We better realize
Thanks again.
To be continued.
Yes, I hope that our paths cross again very soon.
I hope so too.
Because it's always fun to have you.
Indeed.
Well, thanks so much.
Indeed.
Good to be with you, gentlemen.
Yep.
Until next time.